You know that feeling sometimes? Like there are these core energies or forces within you, sort of shaping everything from how you feel to how you act.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like there's this hidden architecture to our inner world, these fundamental components that interact in really surprising ways.
Exactly. And today we're doing a deep dive into one of the most, well, powerful and maybe counterintuitive of these forces.
Hmm.
We're exploring the water element of the soul. We've got this fascinating stack of sources here discussing the four foundational elements: fire, spirit, water, and earth, and how they connect to, our inner lives.
Right. And our mission, really, in this deep dive is to unpack what this water element actually represents. Why is it considered so vital?
Yeah, what happens when it's off?
What happens when it's out of balance? And crucially, what can we do about it
Yeah.
based on these ancient teachings?
Okay, so the source material, it references Rabbi Chaim Vital's breakdown, and it links these elements to different parts of us, right?
That's right.
Fire is pride, spirit is speech, earth is sadness or laziness. But we're focusing today on water, which the source connects straight to desire and pleasure.
And here's a key concept, like right off the bat.
Yeah.
These sources identify the water element not just as one piece, but as the sustaining element of the soul.
Sustaining, okay.
It's called the root of all pleasures. And pleasure itself gets this really profound description. It is the power of existence. That's the phrase it's for.
Wow.
So this isn't just, fleeting enjoyment. It sounds like it's fundamental to actually being.
The power of existence, that gives pleasure a whole different weight, doesn't it? So it's not just about feeling good. This source is saying it's about, well, staying alive in a deeper sense.
This is precisely the claim they're making. The sources use this powerful analogy just like your physical body needs water to survive.
Uh-huh.
The human soul, your inner self, cannot survive, or at least not truly thrive, without pleasure or delight.
That's intense. So if someone genuinely felt like zero pleasure, the source suggests they would effectively die, spiritually speaking, even if they're, walking around.
That's what's indicated, yeah.
Yeah.
While it might sound strange from like an external view, the internal state of feeling utterly devoid of delight is described as a kind of soul death.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, because the source then draws this direct line. The more pleasure you experience, the greater your vitality, your actual liveness. The source uses the Hebrew word right.
And logically, the flip side, the less pleasure, the less vitality.
Makes sense.
Think about it with the source's image, like watering a tree. You give it ample water, the tree flourishes, gets strong, produces lots of fruit.
Right.
If the water's scarce, the tree just withers, becomes unproductive.
Yeah.
So more water, more pleasure in the soul directly correlates to greater fruit, more vitality, more capacity for life.
So pleasure isn't some kind of optional extra. According to these sources, it's the essential fuel for your inner vitality. But like any powerful force, it can go wrong, can't it?
Oh, absolutely. The source outlines three main ways the water element, this vital pleasure current, can get disrupted or imbalanced.
Okay, what's the first one?
Right. The first disruption is excessive pleasure. The source calls it ikwe. This is where seeking pleasure isn't just, necessary fuel, but becomes the only goal. It just constantly overflows.
And the tree analogy works here too, but in reverse, right? Like a little water is life, but if you flood the tree, surround it completely with water, the source says it actually ruins it.
Precisely. Too much pleasure removes necessary boundaries. And paradoxically, it weakens the soul's ability to face difficulty, to struggle, to engage with challenges. It diminishes what the source calls the power of war, which is linked to the fire element. See, these elements, they're meant to be in balance. Excessive water just suppresses the fire.
And we can see the effects of that imbalance in, well, everyday life, can't we? The source gives some pretty striking examples.
Yeah, it does.
Someone indulging way too much in food, for instance, not just for nourishment or, appropriate enjoyment, but needing dozens of flavors, always seeking the next sensory hit.
Yes. Or just that internal suffering that can actually come from that constant chase, even if they look like they're having a good time outwardly.
Right.
Physical consequences like significant weight gain are mentioned. One example was someone reaching 130 kilograms. Financial problems from just overspending on gratification. Even things like people giving up easily on tasks that require effort, like the source mentions taking out the trash, or sticking with difficult studies that's linked to this too.
So it's not just personal indulgence. The source even connects it to bigger things like societal trends, high immigration rates maybe, if people are just seeking comfort and ease over facing the challenges where they are.
Exactly. It points to a fundamental loss of that necessary inner grit, that fire element when the water is just unchecked.
Okay, so that's too much. What's the second disruption?
Moving on, the second one is insufficient pleasure or a shed. This is perhaps what many people might just call lacking motivation or feeling kind of numb or depressed, a fundamental lack of vitality.
Like feeling you're not fully alive, even if you're going through the motions.
Exactly that. Like trying to get water from a faucet and only getting a weak trickle, or maybe nothing at all.
Yeah.
This lack of pleasure, it essentially starves the soul's vitality, leads directly to reduced activity, or maybe no activity. And the source notes, this is actually considered one of the most difficult problems to fix.
Wow, really?
Yeah. When your core fuel for just being alive is low, everything feels like a huge struggle. Or maybe you just stop trying.
Okay, that sounds incredibly tough. So what's the third way the water element gets disrupted?
That one is pleasure from the wrong source.
Yeah.
This is about drawing your vital pleasure, that sense of aliveness, from places that are ultimately, well, inappropriate or damaging, unhealthy.
Ah, like the analogy the source uses about drinking salt water?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're thirsty, you drink it thinking it'll help, but it doesn't quench your thirst at all. It actually makes you more thirsty.
Creates a vicious cycle.
Right. You're constantly seeking satisfaction, but never really finding it. Like that reference to broken cisterns that hold no water. The foundational idea here is that humans were created to experience delight. Man was not created except to delight, is how this source puts it.
Yeah.
But the original intention was delighting in God, in that divine connection.
Okay.
Since what the source calls the sin, unfortunately, people also find pleasure in things that are false or corrupt or just harmful.
And the source breaks pleasure down
Yes.
into three types.
Spiritual pleasure, which is the ideal, permissible physical pleasure, which is necessary but needs balance, and then forbidden or corrupt physical pleasure,
Which needs to go.
which must be rooted out entirely, yeah. Getting your vitality from these wrong sources, especially the forbidden ones, just creates that cycle of craving without any real lasting fulfillment.
Okay, so we have excessive pleasure, insufficient pleasure, and pleasure from the wrong source. How do these sources suggest we actually correct these imbalances? Let's start with the first one, excessive pleasure. If you're overindulging, how do you, dial it back?
Right. So this requires consciously bringing in the other elements, specifically fire and earth. To counter too much water, you need the discipline and strength of fire and the boundaries of earth.
Okay, how does fire help?
Using fire means deliberately seeking out and doing tasks that don't offer immediate pleasure. The source gives really relatable examples, like just taking out the trash when you don't feel like it,
Ah, okay.
or reciting prayers, like Psalms, even when you feel totally flat spiritually, or helping someone without any personal desire or expecting anything back.
That makes sense. You're basically training your soul to act based on will or duty, not just what feels good right now, building up that power of war, that ability to struggle.
Exactly. But, and this is important, the source stresses starting small, being gradual.
Right, don't go extreme.
Yeah, trying extreme self-denial often just backfires.
No.
Leads to discouragement, or you just give up completely. Build that fire muscle slowly,
Got it. And how does Earth come into play?
Earth is all about limitation, setting boundaries. It acts like sand holding back the sea, containing the water element.
Staying this wood?
Precisely. The example given is simple but effective. Gradually reduce the quantity of something enjoyable. Like if you usually eat 7 pieces of some treat, consciously decide to just eat 6. It's about implementing conscious restriction, setting limits.
So for excessive pleasure, challenge yourself with fire. Limit yourself with earth. Makes sense. Now, what about the second problem, insufficient pleasure? You said the source calls this one particularly difficult.
It really is considered one of the most challenging. The core goal here is to somehow ignite or increase the actual desire for pleasure, for aliveness itself. It's tricky.
How do you even do that?
Well, the source discusses one method, but immediately warns it's very risky. It involves temporarily removing even the minimal pleasure a person does have to try and create this profound craving, like withholding water to make someone intensely thirsty.
Wow, that sounds dangerous. Like, really dangerous.
It is. The source warns it can backfire spectacularly. It could lead to total despair, pushing the person entirely into the negative aspects of the earth, element, sadness, paralysis, even extinguishing that last tiny spark of vitality. So,
Yeah.
not recommended without extreme caution or guidance.
Okay, so if that's the risky path, what's the preferred way to try and reignite that spark?
Ideally, the best scenario is receiving water from above. Like a natural, innate wellspring of vitality or desire just starts flowing, like rain falling effortlessly.
Some people just have that naturally.
Many people do, yeah.
Huh.
But if that natural flow is low or blocked, then you have to dig for water from below.
And that digging, that sounds like effort, doesn't it? Which sounds like fire again.
Yes, exactly. It requires effort and motivation, which comes from the fire element. And that's where the profound difficulty arises. When both water, the aliveness, the desire, and fire, the motivation, the effort, are weak.
Oh, I see.
It's like needing to dig for water, but having absolutely no strength to even hold a shovel, and maybe not even feeling thirsty enough to bother trying.
So if you feel that lack of vitality, that real flatness, how do you even begin to dig? Where do you start?
You have to look for any flicker, any tiny point, no matter how small, where you do feel even a tiny spark of life, a moment of pleasure or interest, anything at all.
Find the crack where the light gets in, sort of?
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
The source uses the image of that weak stream from a faucet. Maybe the pipe is just really narrow or it's blocked up. The work then becomes try to widen that pipe, clear the blockages, somehow expand that tiny spark.
And if someone genuinely feels nothing, no pleasure from anything.
The source indicates that's a very, very severe state. Really difficult.
The source also mentions external help, right? Like prayers from others or just being around vital people.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
There's actually a remarkable story in the source about a man who was literally walking into the sea intending to end his life.
Wow.
And someone nearby, completely unrelated, told a joke. And that brief external spark, the source links it to spirit, gave him just enough temporary vitality, just a moment of connection, that he turned back.
Just a joke.
Yeah. It's presented not necessarily as a permanent fix, but as a demonstration that sometimes external life-giving forces can provide a crucial starting point when your own internal reserves are totally depleted.
That's a really powerful image. A single joke as a lifeline. Okay, so last problem. Pleasure from the wrong source. How do you reroute that energy if you're hooked on something unhealthy?
This is primarily addressed, according to the source, by using the spirit element, which is seen as the power of channeling, focusing, and redirecting energy.
Okay, channeling, like the water bill example you mentioned. If your bill is sky high because you're hooked up to the neighbor's pipe by mistake, the solution isn't to stop using water altogether. It's to disconnect from the wrong pipe and connect to your own correct one.
Precisely. Or like needing warm water from a faucet.
Yeah.
You can't just turn off the cold. You have to mix the hot and cold properly from the right taps in the right proportion.
Right.
And the key insight here, the really crucial part, is that you absolutely cannot just remove the wrong source of pleasure and leave a vacuum. You must provide and connect to an alternative, appropriate source.
You can't just take away. You have to replace and redirect. That seems vital.
It's presented as absolutely vital. The source gives a really practical example.
Right.
If someone gets their main pleasure from, say, eating refined white flour or white rice all the time, you don't just tell them, stop eating carbs. That leaves a huge hole. Instead, you guide them to replace it with whole wheat or brown rice. You maintain the necessary quantity of nourishment or satisfaction, but you change the type, the source of that pleasure.
So forbidden pleasures, they have to be actively stopped. That's using earth, the restriction element again. But that disconnection must be paired with channeling that necessary amount of pleasure towards a different, permissible, or even spiritual source using the spirit element.
Exactly. And the source issues a really strong warning here. If you disconnect from a wrong source, but fail to connect to a new right source, you'll just fall right back into the second problem, insufficient pleasure. Lack of vitality. It leaves the person feeling like dry bones, which is a reference to a vision of like utter lifelessness. Connection to the right source is absolutely vital after you disconnect from the wrong one.
That really ties it all together, doesn't it? It's not about denying this fundamental need for pleasure and vitality, but about making sure it flows from a healthy, life-giving place. And that brings us to the final, maybe more proactive idea from these sources, the importance of identifying your own core source of vitality.
Yes, exactly. Regardless of whether you feel like you're currently dealing with one of these imbalances, the source really emphasizes the profound importance of knowing, like truly knowing where your deepest, purest source of vitality or pleasure actually comes from.
That sounds like it might require some significant introspection, self-discovery.
It absolutely does. It's described as being like digging to find the clearest, most reliable wellspring for yourself.
Digging for water again.
Right. The source contrasts a tree that's rooted by a single, clear, defined water source which provides consistent, reliable nourishment, allowing strong growth, with a tree trying to survive on scattered, unclear streams, or maybe shifting river channels like the complex delta of the Nile, where the water source isn't easily defined or consistently accessed.
And the benefit of finding that clear core source for yourself, what does that give you?
It allows you to focus your life force, basically, to orient yourself towards that source, drawing clear, pure vitality much more consistently.
Okay.
Now, it doesn't mean you only draw from that one place the source is clear. You still need fire for challenges and other elements for balance, but having that primary defined wellspring is presented as crucial for sustained and clear water in the soul.
So clarifying where your deepest vitality truly comes from isn't just like an interesting thought experiment. It's presented here as a fundamental process for maintaining clear and consistent water within your whole soul's system.
It really provides that essential foundation for everything else.
So there you have it, a deep dive into the water element presented not just as a simple feeling, but as, well, the sustaining force of the soul, the very root of pleasure, and the power of existence itself.
Yeah, understanding it seems key to understanding your own vitality, your own sense of being alive.
And it's not about avoiding pleasure, is it? It's about mastering its flow, making sure you have the right amount from the right source, and channeling it effectively.
Right. The path to true inner vitality seems to involve recognizing and correcting these imbalances when they happen, and using the other elements, fire for struggle, earth for boundaries, spirit for redirection, as the tools to manage this incredibly powerful force.
And acknowledging, like you said, that this isn't always easy work. It takes awareness and effort.
Definitely. But the framework is there.
This material certainly gives you a lot to think about, doesn't it? How conscious are you, really, of your soul's deepest need for pleasure and vitality?
And maybe have you taken the time to truly identify the clear primary source from which your inner vitality genuinely flows? Or is it more like those scattered streams?
What might change in your life if you actually decided to, dig a little deeper to find it? Something to mull over until our next deep dive.